All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Natural Resource Committee. And I'll say that again, we've moved rooms, hearing rooms, so this is the Natural Resource Committee. So if you're here for a different hearing, you need to probably go to the other end of the hallway. So this is the Natural Resource Committee hearing room for today. I am Senator Bruce Bostelman from Brainerd, representing the 23rd Legislative District, and I serve as chair of the committee. The committee will take up the bills in the order posted. This public hearing today is your opportunity to be part of the legislative process and to express your position on the proposed legislation before us. If you're planning to testify today, please fill out one of the green testifier sheets that are on the table at the back of the room. Be sure to print clearly and fill it out completely. When it is your turn to come forward to testify, give the testifier sheet to the page or to the committee clerk. If you do not wish to testify but would like to include your position on a bill, there are also white sign-in sheets back on the table. These sheets will be included as an exhibit in the official hearing record. When you come up to testify, please speak clearly and loudly into the microphone. Tell us your name and spell your first and last name to ensure we get an accurate record. We will begin each bill hearing today with the introducer's opening statement, followed by proponents of the bill, then opponents, and finally by anyone speaking in the neutral capacity. We will finish with a closing statement by the introducer if they wish to give one. We'll be using a 5-minute light system for all testifiers. When you begin your testimony, the light on the table will be green. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute remaining, and the red light indicates you need to wrap up your final thought and stop. Questions from the committee may follow. Also, committee members may come and go during the hearing. This has nothing to do with the importance of the bills being heard. It is just part of the process, as senators may have bills to introduce in other committees. A few final items to facilitate today's hearing. If you have handouts or copies of your testimony, please bring up at least 10 copies and give them to the page. Please silence or turn off your cell phones. Verbal outbursts or applause are not permitted in the hearing room. Such behavior may be cause for you to be asked to leave the hearing. Finally, committee procedures for all committees states that written position letters to be included in the record must be submitted by noon the last business day before the scheduled hearing on that particular bill. The only acceptable method of submission is via the legislature's website at nebraskalegislature.gov. You may submit a written letter for the record or testify in person at the hearing, not both. Written position letters will be included in the official hearing record, but only those testifying in person before the committee will be included on the committee statement. I will now have the committee members with us today introduce themselves, starting on my left.
We'll mix it up today. Senator Julie Slama, District 1, Otoe, Johnson, Nemaha, Pawnee, and Richardson counties.
Jana Hughes, District 24, Seward, York, Polk, and a little bit of Butler County.
On the far right.
Senator Tom Brandt, District 32, Fillmore, Thayer, Jefferson, Saline, and southwestern Lancaster counties.
Good morning, Senator John Frederickson, Central West Omaha and Douglas County, District 20.
Mike Jacobson, District 42. It's Lincoln, Logan, Hooker, Thomas, McPherson, and 3/4 of Perkins County.
John Kavanaugh, District 9, Midtown Omaha.
Mike Moser, District 22. It's Black County and parts of Stanton County.
Senator Mosher also serves as vice chair of the committee. Also assisting as the committee today is to my left, legal counsel Cindy Lamb, and to my far left is committee clerk Lori Vollertson. Our pages for the committee today are John Vanas and Chrissy Golseth. So thank you both for joining us today and helping out. With that, I would invite Senator Armendariz to come up to open on LB 599.
Thanks, Chairman Bosselman and members of the Natural Resources Committee. For the record, my name is Christy Armendariz, CHRISTYARMENDARIZ. I represent District 18 in Northwest Omaha and Bennington. I'm here to introduce LB 599, a bill that introduces the advanced recycling process to Nebraska. The bill defines a regulatory framework for advanced recycling, including the facilities, process, and material. I think that we can all agree that it is our collective intent to positively impact climate change and improve Nebraska's environment and the economy. Increasing the amount of plastic that can be recycled is one approach to enable a circular economy, strengthen our state's supply chains, and reinforce its manufacturing capacity. Innovative technologies such as advanced recycling can take many of the plastics which cannot be recycled via traditional methods and convert them into new high-value plastics, chemical products. These new technologies offer the opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 70% over new forms of crude oil extraction. Advanced recycling resembles the traditional manufacturing process by taking a feedstock and producing a new product. Rather than a form of disposal, this process should in turn qualify as utilizing raw materials for a manufacturing process under existing state and local regulations. LB 599 seeks to regulate advanced recycling as a manufacturing process while protecting human health and the environment. Much like the traditional manufacturing process, advanced recycling facilities will be subject to the Federal Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act and NDEE authority. They also need to obtain operating permits and continue to monitor and report various air emissions and wastewater discharge as they operate. The bill states that advanced recycling facilities are subject to applicable NDEE manufacturing regulations for air, water, waste, and land use. Studies have shown that the United States can support more than 150 advanced recycling facilities nationwide. That would result in 48,500 jobs, $3.3 billion in annual payrolls, and $12.9 billion in annual economic output. Our office has been working with Director Jim Macy from the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy on AM 214 to ensure that the recovered feedstocks and post-polymers will be stored in an enclosed facility and that the owner or operator of an advanced recycling facility shall be responsible for the proper disposal of all post-use polymers or recovered feedstocks on the facility premises within 60 days of cessation of operation, meaning if they should close operation, they need to remove anything left behind within 60 days. That's in one of the amendments. We have also worked with Waste Management on AM 213 to further define that the materials used in these facilities are pre-sorted, cleaned, and purchased. 21 other states have passed similar legislation, including our neighbors, Iowa and Missouri. I encourage the committee to advance LB 599 and make Nebraska a potential site for these advanced recycling facilities. This is an opportunity to encourage technological innovation, create new manufacturing jobs, and promote a cleaner environment. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions, and I will have an industry expert testifying right after me to answer questions. I can just add that in my day, night, weekend job alongside this, we were faced with exponentially high recycling costs as China started limiting or refusing taking recyclables in the last several years, especially since the pandemic. So this is a great opportunity for Nebraska to figure out how do we recycle those plastics that we can no longer ship over to China and create jobs at the same time.
Great.
Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Senator Armendariz. Are there questions? Senator Hughes.
So we're going to call this manufacturing, which it sounds like it is. Since it is advanced recycling, would they be eligible for grants from we have the grant program, sorry, I can't think what it's called, the recycling. I just lost the name of it, like the scrap tire money. We have grants that you can use for recycling. Would that qualify for that? And maybe you don't.
I don't know that, but the
The guy
person that's going to talk
Okay,
after me
I'll hold that
probably
question, and I'll
does
find out
know,
the
because
right
I
name
bet
of
you
that.
they have looked into all the grants that they
Okay.
have available to them.
Thank you.
Other questions from committee members? Sir Mosher.
Why is the bill necessary? Why wouldn't they just remelt or liquefy these plastics or whatever they're gonna do? Why do they need to change the law?
So to change from a solid waste facility like our garbage, like waste management is, they want to be a manufacturing facility, which
Waste
very
management
closely.
wants to do this?
No, this
Oh.
advanced recycling wants to be a manufacturer, not a solid waste facility.
What's the advantage in, I mean,
A cleaner, faster process to get up and running, get the jobs going. So the certification process is just easier through the
you
manufacturing
mean
process.
being a
than solid waste.
recycler is more of a burden than being a manufacturer as far as regulation?
To my understanding, yeah, it is more difficult to be certified at that, but certainly person speaking behind me will talk more on that, but that is my understanding that this process replicates a manufacturing. They are taking a raw material, not unlike steel or cotton and processing it. And then the output is something different.
Are
that
there
we can use.
certain types of plastic that this applies to?
Yeah, it's the ones that we can't normally recycle in our recycle
And
bin.
there's
at
like
the-
5 or 6 different kinds of plastic.
Yeah, and I think it's like the numbers 4 through 7, if I'm recalling right, that we can't put in our recycle bin. So they,
And
one
so-
example to me was the ties around the hay bales that farmers use that they can't be recycled. I just bought a house and there are straps that package the doors, those hard plastics. Certainly the trash cans that you put on the curb that the trash trucks pick up are those types of plastics.
Thank you.
Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair Bossman. Does the infrastructure for this already exist? Like, are these facilities already in existence, or would these be required to be built and or renovated to allow
These
for
would be
this?
new and they would be all enclosed.
They would be all
And I've
enclosed.
asked about the noise, anything in the air or smells, and it does not appear that that is the case. There is no noise or smells.
Okay. And do we have a sense of where these might be located throughout the state?
I don't know yet. I know they've been talking to different communities about it.
Thank you.
Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman Bossman. Thank you, Senator Armandaris, for bringing this. To follow up on what Senator Frederickson said, so we could locate these inside the city of Omaha.
I don't know if there's regulation inside the city that would limit it. We haven't gone that far
I'll
yet.
wait for another testifier then. Thank you.
Okay.
Seeing no other questions, will you stay for closing?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask anyone who would like to testify as a proponent for LB 599, please step forward. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Bosman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Prapti Muhuri, spelled Prapti Muhuri, and I'm here today on behalf of the American Chemistry Council, also known as the ACC. The ACC is a national trade association representing almost 200 global companies representing the chemical industry, including the leading manufacturers of plastic resins. Today, I'm here to support Legislative Bill 599, which appropriately regulates advanced recycling as manufacturing. Increasing sustainability and reducing plastic waste are extremely important for our industry. This includes enabling innovation to drive recycling rates upward. To date, Nebraska and much of the United States have been able to mechanically recycle things like soda and water bottles, milk jugs, detergent bottles, and some tubs and lids. The latest EPA statistics show a 9% recycling rate for all plastics and a 13.8% recycling rate for plastics packaging. So that leaves a whole host of plastics that have either been sent to landfill or combusted for incineration. So we clearly have a challenging job by mechanically recycling complexly engineered packaging, such as food pouches, plastic wrappings, foam products, tubs, etc. Additionally, economics, market demand, and the recent restrictions from China have had a major impact. This is where innovation comes in, and valuable plastics that can be turned into new products instead of being incinerated or sent to landfills can play a huge role. Advanced recycling, also commonly referred to as chemical recycling by the industry, is the process in which facility operators will essentially purchase already sorted plastics after they've been used and convert them into raw materials for new chemicals and plastics. These are truly circular and environmentally friendly solutions that do not combust or burn the plastic material. There are many examples of how these technologies have already been implemented throughout the United States. I'll just name a few. Wendy's announced that they're switching from their paper-lined drink cups to an all-plastic cup made with 20% recycled plastics, thanks to advanced recycling. Additionally, Herbal Essences, one of the highest profile brands of Procter & Gamble, has announced a partnership with Eastman Chemical to produce 5 shampoo and conditioner bottles made from 50% certified recycled plastic. And companies such as Warby Parker, Under Armour, and others are bringing recycled materials to the eyewear industry via advanced recycling technologies. Now let's talk a little bit about the economic development and how it's promising for the state of Nebraska. If Nebraska became a hub for advanced recycling technologies and converted just 50% of the currently landfill plastic feedstock in the state, it could generate nearly $75 million in economic output each year and up to 300 manufacturing jobs. Lastly, as manufacturing facilities, these technologies are also subject to federal, state, and local environmental regulations, including the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act. And 21 other states, including neighboring states of Iowa and Missouri, as mentioned, have enacted laws to ensure that these technologies are regulated as manufacturing. Lastly, it is very critical that advanced recycling companies looking to invest in this state, that their technology will be properly and appropriately regulated as manufacturing, and that the products that they produce count as recycling and towards future recycling content targets. LB 599 accomplishes these objectives and paves the way for Nebraska to be a national leader in reducing plastic waste. Thus, I ask for your support of LB 599 to help bring added investments and jobs to the state of Nebraska while increasing recycling, conserving resources, and reducing plastic waste. With that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your time today and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Other questions from committee members? Senator Jacobson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Bostelman. I kind of looked through the bill. I'm trying to figure out why somebody's going to be against it. And I hate to have you make the case for any opponents, but, and I know Senator Armendariz well enough to know that she wouldn't have brought the bill if this wasn't a pretty good deal. But tell me why we would be against this.
I think there's some misconceptions and understanding of the environmental benefits of advanced recycling. You know, if we look at plastics, it's a very ubiquitous material. After it's reached its end of life, there are several options on how to manage its end of life. You can either recycle through traditional methods like mechanical recycling, but if that's not a good fit, then your really options right now are to send it to landfill or incinerate it.
But let me be clear. You're not asking for any money.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And really, you're really looking for the ability to offer this as a manufacturing product. And at this stage of the game, anyhow, no one's being required to sort this and send it. They're actually going to purchase this from the individuals who have it. So I'm searching for the downside. I can't find it. So maybe there'll be some opponents, but thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew.
Senator Mosier.
So why is this bill necessary? I mean, what can't you do in recycling plastic that current regulations don't allow?
Thanks, Senator, for the question. The main difference between advanced recycling operators and solid waste disposal facilities is that they're not taking in garbage. They're already taking clean and pre-sorted plastics. Additionally, they're purchasing the material.
Back up a second.
Sure.
Who's taking clean and recyclable plastics?
The actual technology companies that are processing these plastics and turning them into raw
The
materials.
new companies that are gonna
That's correct.
re-liquefy this plastic or whatever and remold it as something else or something. But why can't they just go buy plastic and do whatever they're gonna do to it, make it into a new product? What's the reason for another law? What's the law do to help you?
That's a great question. There isn't enough regulatory certainty in current solid waste statute.
Or
that
you're
would-
afraid once they get started, they will come along and say, hey, you can't do this?
No, not at all. It really kind of delays the on-ramp time for a new technology or company to site a facility, get their permitting, if there's that kind of ambiguity in current statute. So as a manufacturer, it's very clear that they're taking in a product that they're purchasing, already clean, pre-sorted material, and turning that into a raw material. they wouldn't be regulated as a solid waste manufacturer or as a solid waste disposal facility because they're not taking in garbage. So that's kind of the clear delineation there. I'll just give an example of a state where this regulation had not been enacted yet, and a company came in, and it was just months and months of time to kind of show that they would be eligible for the same permitting as any other manufacturing facility, and that kind of delayed the process of obtaining their permits and getting started. So having that regulatory certainty in the state really just starts the process a bit sooner and brings the investment to the state.
Thank you.
Sir Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Bossman. Thank you for being here. It's an interesting conversation. So how is, I guess, say aluminum cans is what I think of when I think of recycling. So you're saying this should be distinguished from converting aluminum cans into raw aluminum because why?
So I'll just give the example with plastics because this is a different material that we're talking about, right? So plastics that are normally mechanically recycled are kind of like your soda bottles, water bottles, et cetera, right? That leaves a whole host of plastics that just don't have end markets by being mechanically recycled. So essentially what these companies are doing are taking those used plastics, cooling, condensing them, melting those plastics at high temperatures, cooling, condensing them. What comes out essentially is a liquid feedstock. That liquid feedstock is basically sold as a commodity to petrochemical offtake partners. They then take that as a replacement for virgin fossil feedstock. So it's truly a circular process. So Senator Armendariz mentioned kind of the wrappings for a lot of the items in her home building process. That technically can be recycled. But if you were to put that in your blue bin and that would go to a material recovery facility, it wouldn't get turned into another product. It would probably go to landfill because our end markets right now are really supportive of what we call our number 1 and 2 plastics. That leaves a whole host of other plastics, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s that have no home. So we're really creating a market opportunity for those other harder to recycle plastics.
But I'm trying to understand the distinction between this plastic and other recycling, because it sounds to me like you're taking a waste product, even though you're buying it from somebody, and you are sending it through a process and then coming out with still a raw material. It's not a finished product. I assume you're not going to make these Warby Parker glasses there, right? You're going to make plastic that then you're going to sell to Warby Parker or some manufacturer, right? So you're an intermediary. How is that different than whoever in Omaha, I guess, is taking aluminum and turning it into a raw aluminum material and selling it to somebody else?
So I would say as long as it's considered, as long as they're taking the plastic feedstock and turning into a raw material, that should be designated as a manufacturing process. There is no incineration or combustion of the material, which is why it should be clearly distinct from a solid waste disposal process. I hope that answers your question, Senator, but happy to clarify.
I don't think it does. Yeah. So are you saying that when I put out are you from Omaha? I guess you're probably not from Omaha. We had these small green bins for a long time now. We've got a big recycling bin. I put a whole bunch of stuff in there except for, plastics. We have the orange bag,
Right.
which is going to incineration, is my understanding. Right?
It's going to cement kilns, pyrolysis, which is a form of advanced recycling. So it's going to several different end markets.
And you want to be distinguished from that, and you want to be distinguished from the cardboard recycler, the aluminum recycler. And I'm trying to understand why we should treat this differently, because all the things you're saying just sound to me like this is just a different version of recycling.
It's definitely a complementary version of recycling. I can't comment on all of the end markets for materials like aluminum and other formats and what they get turned into. For plastic specifically, if they're not being sent to an incinerator and if they're not being landfilled, but they're being turned into a raw material, valuable product, that should be considered a manufacturing process because it's going back into kind of closing the loop, if you will. And that's going into as a drop-in feed for producing virgin plastics.
Okay. This almost seems like just a semantical argument about what recycling is. So a different question is this bill seems to exempt these facilities from local regulation. Is that right?
Local solid waste regulation.
Okay, so does it put them under a separate section then of local manufacturing regulation?
Correct. So they would be exempt from any solid waste permitting regulation. They would still be subject to all of the air, water usage, and land use permitting like any other manufacturing facility would be subject to.
So what is the specific part of recycling regulation, local regulation, that you want to get out from under and into the manufacturing regulation?
The mere point of not taking in any solid waste or garbage. Since they're not taking any type of mixed material, it's just plastics. That's why they shouldn't be subject to any of the existing solid waste regulation.
And I'm hearing you there, and that's kind of the same conversation we're having, but I want to know, what is it, the regulation that is the problem? So you're making an argument for why we should take care of the regulation, but what is the thing you want to get away from?
It's not to skirt or exempt from any existing regulation. It's just that these processes are not what solid waste facilities are doing. It's just a different process, right? When you have material coming into a material recovery facility, it's not just plastics. To your point, Senator, you get cardboard, aluminum, you get, municipal solid waste. That's why they're subject to the regulation that's currently existing statute. These advanced recycling companies are only taking in plastics and then turning them into a feedstock to make new plastics and chemicals. Therefore, the process in which they're doing it, the feedstock that they're taking in, is very different from any type of solid waste disposal facility. Therefore, the same permitting and regulation shouldn't apply.
Okay.
So the material that you receive may or may not come from a current waste facility. Are you also taking that, would you also take that material and say overages that may come from someplace if they can't sell whatever the widget is, that those products would be coming into for, I think one thing we're talking about here is something going to the landfill. As far as that process, the refuse person comes by, takes your garbage, takes it to a facility, it gets sorted out. Now you're taking that might be part of it, but I think what I'm hearing also, potentially there's other plastics out there that don't go through that process that you would be able to receive and put through the process of recycling. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. It's a good point. So the incoming feed can come from, of course, material recovery facilities or mechanical recyclers. It can also come from industrial, commercial sources. If you think about the back of a grocery store has lots of plastic packaging wrapping around their pallets, that is recyclable material and a great feedstock for these type of technologies. So the advanced recycling companies will purchase that material as well to use it as a feedstock.
Sir Frederickson.
Thank you for being here and for so diligently answering all the questions we have. So I kind of wanted to follow up a little bit on Senator Kavanaugh's questions. From what I'm understanding, and I just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly, this bill would enable us as a state to recycle plastics that we currently aren't recycling. Am I hearing that correctly?
That's correct.
So is that kind of the real motive of this bill? It would be to sort of say, look, we have all these plastics that are currently going to landfill. This is a way to actually enable us as a state to recycle these as opposed to landfilling. Is that, I know it seems a little bit simplistic, but is that sort of what the bottom line is here, or?
Absolutely, Senator, and I appreciate the sentiments in the most simplistic terms. There have been over $7 billion in announced investments just to expand or build advanced recycling capacity. A lot of these companies are looking for new facilities to site. If they have that regulatory certainty that their process would be regulated as manufacturing, it's easier for them to consider that state or that location. And just like 21 other states have done that, we're looking for Nebraska to support the same. Additionally, all of the plastics that aren't mechanically recycled, before 2017, before China stopped taking your plastics, that was going overseas. But now that that's come to an end, we're really faced with the challenge of how do we recycle all of those other hard to recycle plastics. So this type of technology really provides great promise. But again, when they're coming into a state where the regulatory certainty is not there, it makes the process to get started a lot more difficult.
Sure. I think, in general, I love this idea. I think my biggest concern would be sort of my question to Senator Armendariz is just kind of location. And I'm sitting with my farmer friend who very effectively asked if this could be in the middle of Omaha. I'm an Omaha senator, so I'm curious about that as well. And so, I think location would be the one thing and sort of, footprint on that. So, yeah, but thank you.
Absolutely.
Sir Jacobson.
Thank you. I guess You mentioned regulatory certainty, and I guess I'm kind of circling around to the question the three of us have had here in terms of, so what regulation are we concerned about that requires this bill to be passed? Because it looks like this is very benign, that this is something that makes all kinds of sense. And so then you have to ask the question, why do we need it? And what are we trying to skirt, or what are we trying to avoid? So can you specifically tell us what do you envision happening without this bill that's going to keep this from happening in Nebraska?
I'll try to answer that again, Senator.
Perfect.
So all of the current existing permits required for a solid waste permitting process that works for, materials recovery facility. However, for an advanced recycling technology, they shouldn't be subject to all of those because they're essentially taking.
Give us an example of what they would not be subject to.
All of the land, stormwater, all of the permits required by a solid waste disposal facility. So just like let me compare it to a standard manufacturing process, right? If you have a potato chip factory, for example, they're still subject to all of the appropriate regulations. An advanced recycling process, similarly, is manufacturing a product. Therefore, they should be regulated as other manufacturing facilities. Let's take, for example, emissions limits. You'll have someone from the state agency authority coming and doing emission stack testing for the products coming out. So the emissions limits and thresholds should be comparable to what other manufacturers are doing, not to what a solid waste disposal facility is doing, because they're essentially, in some cases, burning material, right? So we're not trying to skirt or avoid existing regulation, just regulate them appropriately.
That answers my question. Thank you.
I'm glad you
That's
got
what
the
I was kind of searching for. Thank you.
Sure.
Sir Mosier.
Well, I don't think that there would be, I think the object of the idea of recycling plastics and using them over is a great thing. But what the questions kind of keep circling around here is, what regulation would be a hindrance to reusing these plastics in the manner that you're suggesting? Give me an example of one regulation, or even two, whatever, that would be a hindrance. Why are we exempting you from those rules? What's going to be the problem?
Yeah, so I don't think it's about regulation being a hindrance. I'll give an example of a state where this type of legislation had not yet been passed, and a company came in looking to obtain the necessary permits. So what they found after all of the data that they provided and the products that they're producing, that they would be exempted from solid waste permits. So it's really up to the state authorities to make that determination. We want to avoid the process of that arduous, however many months it takes to figure out, okay, should an advanced recycler be regulated as X, as Y, as Z, and just give the regulatory certainty to say, if you come into the state of Nebraska and they recognize that advanced recycling should be manufacturing, we can give you the necessary permits to get up and going. And I think that really speaks to the 21 other states that have passed similar legislation and the nearly $7 billion in announced investments just for these type of technologies alone.
How do they reuse the plastic? Do they use a solvent to melt it, or do they heat it, or what's the process?
Yeah, so it varies. Advanced recycling it's really an umbrella term. It could be a number of different technologies. You could use pyrolysis, which basically uses heat to melt the plastics, cool and condense them. You get liquid hydrocarbons, and then those vapors are cooled, and you get a liquid feedstock. You can use technologies such as depolymerization. That's really taking the plastics, converting them into their building blocks. So at the monomer level, those monomers are then used to make virgin-like chemicals and plastic feedstocks. I gave the example of, eyewear lenses. That has been very successful and done at a commercial scale because of a depolymerization technique, which falls under the advanced recycling umbrella that's in this legislation. So it's a number of different types of technologies. You mentioned solvent, Senator. There are solvent-based processes where you can use a catalyst or a solvent base, whether it's glycol, alcohol, methanol, to further transform the plastics back into the original building
And
blocks.
the raw materials you make could be like pelletized plastic, or it could be a liquid.
Yeah, in most instances, it's basically a liquid feedstock, very similar to crude naphtha. And then that gets put into a storage tank, then shipped to, let's say, the petrochemical offtake partners. They basically put that in a steam cracker, blend that with virgin fossil-based feedstock, and then what they're producing is a circular plastic resin. And that gets made into new packaging.
Well, obviously, there's a whole lot more to this than what most state senators are gonna know anything about. So I appreciate your patience in explaining it. Thank you.
Sir Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman Bosselman. Real quick, so in agriculture, we use a lot of 2.5 gallon plastic jugs for our chemicals. And so we use the chemical, we triple rinse the jug. But I would assume that all the 2,4-D or the glyphosate is still embedded in the walls of some sort. Generally, our co-ops have done an admirable job of taking these jugs back, and then they go to a recycler. So in the examples that you give, and I don't know what the number is on the bottom of these jugs, I assume it's a 4, 5, 6, or 7. This manufacturer is taking those raw materials in just like a waste disposal company did or does now. Is that a correct statement?
Correct. It's what they do after with the material.
Well, absolutely, after. But what I'm saying on the front end, this is going to look a lot like they're taking those chemical jugs or pop bottles or whatever, and that waste stream is a facility like what we've got now. It's just coming out the other end. You're making a higher value product. You're adding value to the product, and I think that's admirable. But I would think some of the existing rules would apply to a manufacturer like this if you have a mountain of material out there that hasn't been processed yet.
So the way that I answer that is twofold. One, as you mentioned, the kind of front-end process can be very similar to how a mechanical recycler is doing it, right? Sorting, drying, melting the plastics. But what's happening at the kind of the back end, like you said, Senator, is it's really being turned into a high value raw material product. What might be helpful as a follow-up is kind of a side-by-side of existing Nebraska solid waste statute with manufacturing statute, and kind of a line-by-line comparison on why the advanced recyclers should really be seen as a manufacturer.
Because I need a little clearer understanding of what we're trying to change here. So thank you.
Happy to do so. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for answering our questions. We appreciate it. I'm sure as committee, if we have additional questions we want to ask, let's do it with maybe the next testifier or when we get done with the hearing, if that's okay. All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator.
Next proponent for LB 599, please step forward. Anyone else like to testify as a proponent? Good morning.
Hello,
Welcome.
thank you for your time. My name is Kirsten Heiberger. That's KJERSTENHYBERGER. I'm just representing myself. Overhearing the conversation, I just wanted to try to add a little clarity. And I think if we back up to maybe our homes, and most of us have a trash can and a recycling bin. And so we self-sort those two streams, and the trash, and they're both considered solid waste. And so a solid waste hauler comes and picks up our trash and it goes to the landfill. Our recycler is also a solid waste. That's what they do. So they take in the recycling. And then, like you said, there are plastics, cans, cardboards, and at that facility, they sort through all of those materials that come in. And so they're not at the Lincoln recycling facility turning the cans into something. They're not a manufacturer. But what they do is they sort that material, and there's another company that will take cardboard and turn it into something else. There's another company. And when we say recycling, I'm going to use the term traditional recycling, as we have all known it. So those recyclers would send aluminum to aluminum processors, and the 1, 2, 3 plastics to the people that deal with those plastics. And then there's this stuff that they get, and there's nowhere to send it. We used to send a lot of those hard plastics to China. And China said, we're not doing it anymore. That forced Americans to start innovating and saying, oh, well, I'll take that and turn it into a value-added product. And so where all of the recycling raw materials go, they go to manufacturers. So it's not that advanced recycling is trying to skirt our regulations. It's that if a company came to Nebraska and said, we want to do this advanced recycling, we only have regulations for solid waste. So they would maybe try to fill out those permits, and then the people at the solid waste would be like, you're not doing what we do. So what this does is creates a framework, of regulations for a manufacturer that deals with those 4, 5, 6, and 7s to come in and start taking those products and doing that recycling here in the state. Whereas right now, if we don't have anywhere to send them, they go into our landfill. And so it's just an innovation of a new industry that hasn't existed before. So therefore, we have not yet put up the regulatory framework to allow it to come to Nebraska. Those companies are going to go to the 21 states that already have the framework and are saying, come here, we'll take your tax money and we'll work with you. That's all.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Other questions, committee members? Senator Hughes.
So the solid waste company is the recycling company that comes, takes it from our bin. And then I'm going to go to Senator Kavanaugh's question. They take the aluminum cans and send it to like a smelter or whatever. And is that considered a manufacturer then?
I believe so. In my understanding of the process, yes.
So, yeah. And what we're talking about here is one of those entities.
Exactly.
And that's why they shouldn't be called, but the
So they're not-
confusion is, it's never been in the United States before.
Right.
So some places are like, oh, I think it's solid waste, but it's like, well, it's not really, but it's not. And that's what we're just making it definitive that this is a manufacturing process, just like the aluminum can smelter or the milk jug guy that
Exactly.
makes it into.
Advanced recyclers won't even deal with all of those things. They're not taking
Right,
in
there's
waste.
the one product.
Yeah.
They're the one after. It's from your
Exactly.
doorstep, then it's solid waste, and then it's all the next.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just like when we have tree limbs and things, those get sorted a different, it doesn't go to the trash. It goes to then the people that.
So
deal
it's
with it.
almost like it's not a new category, but it's a new type of manufacturing that we don't define yet.
Correct.
Any other questions, Senator Kavanaugh?
Sorry, then that goes to so would this company be able to get grants from like a recycling fund? Or can only solid waste companies get grants from? Do you know what I'm
That
saying?
would be above I
Yeah,
couldn't
okay,
answer
that's
that,
fine.
but I would think that because 21 states have done it, there are federal programs and things, just like there are any other, especially environmental.
Thanks. Sorry.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. I would just point out there's a section of the statute that specifically adds the definition of advanced recycling facility to the Waste Reduction Recycling Incentive Fund.
Oh, okay.
Language. So that's the very factor. So Senator Hughes asked me one of my first questions. And so I guess the follow-up question to that is, this is a long statute that's got a lot of definitions and changes in it. Wouldn't it just be easier to add a definition of this advanced recycling or whatever we wanted to call it into the section that covers those secondary markets of aluminum, paper, and other things?
I haven't read the bill and I haven't read the whole bill. I would think so, but then that is at the discretion of Nebraska. Is that how we want to handle it? Just add it to what we have and make that new category? But if I understand, the woman before me was saying, those statutes, the regulations are for solid waste facilities, and they wouldn't be taking it.
The ones that they feel like they're currently covered by, but you're saying there is somewhere in our system is contemplated this exact scenario that we're talking about, just for different materials.
Yes.
And so this is, I would assume, I guess, that it's been addressed and successfully been done by those other individuals in maybe a different
I
way.
would share the assumption with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's probably something we're not going to solve today because it would take some looking, but
Yeah, I just want to kind of bring.
you and I
it
can
up
just
there.
talk about it right now, how we want to both look it up later.
Sure, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Seeing no other questions, thank you for your testimony. Does anyone else would like to testify as a proponent for LD 599? Please step forward. Any other proponents? Seeing none, anyone like to testify in opposition to LB 599, please step forward. Good morning.
Morning. Good afternoon, Senator Boston, members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Lash, L-A-S-H, Chaffin, C-H-A-F-F-I-N. I'm going to explain a little bit how local government recycling programs work and why we're opposed to the bill as written. However, I think before I get into that and give a little history of what's happened in the last 30 years, I want to answer some of the questions, because some of the questions do directly relate to some of the league's opposition. One, nothing in Nebraska law needs to change in order for somebody to take the off plastics. I'm all for creating markets, but nothing in Nebraska law needs to change in order for somebody to take 5, 6, 7, 2 plastics. There's actually, right now in Omaha, a manufacturer is starting to do that. We just had him speak at a league conference. It's called First Star Fiber. They're starting to take styrofoam, other plastics. They didn't need a change in the law to do this. So this doesn't authorize nothing in Nebraska law prohibits those plastics being taken today. As a practical matter, no one recycles them because there isn't a market for them. And chemical manufacturers, advanced recycling, would become a market, but that can be done under the guise of current rules under Nebraska law. So I think that's something. We're not saving the state from this by changing the law. The creation of the market would create those opportunities. And that's an important distinction that I think might be getting lost here at this point. That said, how does recycling work in Nebraska? And I think you're going to see behind me some boots on the ground folks that actually do the recycling day to day, and they're not necessarily thrilled with the concepts of this bill. And I think several of you appear to have read it. Here's how recycling works in Nebraska and how it's funded. Okay, the backup in Nebraska and the initiation of it was property taxes. Always property taxes are part of recycling programs. And that's right or wrong. That's something we like to avoid, but it's always there. Secondly, folks who pay to buy the recycled goods. Now that's the preferred funding source. That comes and it goes and it varies from day to day. If someone comes to the city of Holdridge has a very active recycling program and says, I want to buy your aluminum cans, or we'll even compete to buy your aluminum cans. They pay for it. There's some money. So sometimes, not always, but sometimes there's a revenue stream within the recycling program in selling the goods. Thirdly, recycling programs rely on the sheer willpower of volunteers. And this is incredible. And it's an incredible story. And, someday the committee maybe needs to hear the story of the recycling volunteers out there. I know several of you have been involved with local government. You've seen that in action. There's some very devoted volunteers to recycling. And then fourth, there are 2 state funds that provide grants. And there's one, the first fund was I'm going to oversimplify it, was in 1979. It's called something like the Litter Reduction Fund. And that's the one that's funded by pop bottles and a few other sources. But in 1979, it was the bottle bill that created that. And then secondly, in 1992, when the state said, oh, by the way, cities and counties, you have to have licensed landfills. You can't have dumps down by the river anymore. They created a second fund called the Waste Reduction and Recycling Fund. And that's the fund that's funded by $1.25. It's a whole bunch of sources, but it's $1.25 per ton fee when you dump at the landfill. There's the tire fees in there. There's a business fee. There's a whole bunch of fees that go into that. And both of these funds also provide grants that help stabilize the recycling programs across the state. And those funds get spent. They get spent, and they get spent on great projects. And I guess so from the league's perspective, one, we're reluctant to let anybody dilute those 2 existing funds, a new source. I think if they've got a great project, they should be able to participate in it, but we want to make sure they're not diluted, and because those already get spent. And as Senator Kavanaugh identified, this bill does amend the second fund and make them eligible for the Waste Reduction and Recycling Fund monies. And then secondly, the language on page 6, dealing with the exemption from local regulations. The subsection 3, not quite sure what that means, but obviously if this is part of a recycling program, it should be tied in with the other municipal rules and regulations that bring recycling programs together. Or if this is an attempt to exempt it from zoning and land use regulation, clearly we oppose that. So at either level, it's a little unclear how it's written, but we oppose that language and any addition to the fund. So thank you. I see I'm out of time. But.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from committee members? Senator Frederickson.
Thank you for being here and thanks for your testimony. So I heard your opposition to some of the regulations in here. And I don't know if Senator Armendariz is open to amending the bill, but should those amendments be there, would you be willing to work with her office on that? Or?
Oh, absolutely. We would love to work with the senator on those.
The other question I have for you is, I can appreciate your concern, but what I'm wondering is if we weren't to do something or if we weren't to move forward with something like this, what do you suggest we do with these 4, 5, 6 plastics that we can't currently recycle?
Well, I don't think the legislature needs to do anything. And there were some questions like, perhaps you should talk to a manufacturer in Omaha who's already he's taking styrofoam, he's taking the off plastics. He's just starting to do it. Mm-hmm. It's a gentleman named Dale Gubbles and his First Star Fiber. And so I don't think there's any barriers that the legislature needs to remove at this point. Mm-hmm. And again, the question of, I've been around solid waste regulations. I worked with DEQ or at the time it was DEC, when they wrote the initial regulations. And site permits are tiered. Okay, a solid waste management site via federal regulation it's gonna have fancy liners and all kinds of stuff. However, other facilities aren't as rigorous. A municipal tree dump, you have to get a permit, but it's not as rigorous of a permit. A recycling center might have to get a permit depending on how it's structured. Even the potash facilities at the big coal-fired power plants, they have to get a permit and they have to get a solid waste management permit. But it's a pretty clever system in that the permits are based on the complexity of the use itself. So, again, a tree dump is not treated, they have to get a permit. Right. It's not treated the same. They're not called tree dumps. There's a fancy word for it. But
you're suggesting that there's already places in Nebraska that are taking these products.
Yes, I am. And hopefully I know some of the recycling groups are going to pose this too. Maybe they can give you a little more detail on what, all I know is we had 2 weeks ago, we had a league conference where city officials from the state gathered. We had the guy speak.
Got it.
So I know he exists because I sat through his talk.
Thank you.
So,
Senator Hughes.
First of all, how'd you get the name Lash? I have never met anybody named Lash.
Well, Senator Mosier and I have known each other for a long time. We've had this conversation before. No, it was a family name. It was a last name that I got carried down. Although I grew up in a small town, so I didn't realize that it was an unusual name because I grew up in a small town. And everybody else knew Lash.
It's super unique. Who administers the grants from the Waste Reduction and Recycling Fund?
They're administered by the Department of Environment, NDEE.
NDE. So Senator Frederickson asked this, if like that part bothers you and then the local restriction, but I would argue that if you're going to be a brand new manufacturing firm, there's so many regulations that go into place that would be taken care of. But maybe that's a question for the NDEE. What are their requirements when somebody comes to them for a grant? The city of Seward is going to do a tire cleanup day or whatever. They can say yes or no to a company like this. Advanced Recycling comes in and they're like, no, we're going to save it more for local municipalities cleaning up, whatever. I don't know what the kind of projects are. So is there just like this huge worry that these companies are going to come in and just take all that money? And if so, that's our NDEE's prerogative as well.
I think that's the exact analysis. I think that is the fear. The city officials I talked to the last couple of days, their fear is that fun.
So the cities
get
are
it.
worried about this company coming in and kind of absorbing.
You know, and again, it's a mixed bag because they want a new market, but at the same time, they don't want it at the expense of existing
Their own.
programs. Right.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Seeing no other questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next opponent, please. Anyone else like to testify in opposition? You are going to testify, if you can move up to the front. There's 3 seats there, so we kind of move through these a little quicker. Would be good. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm gonna have to lean in close. My name is Haley Nolde, HALEYNOLDE. I am the Executive Director of the Nebraska Recycling Council. I am here on behalf of the Nebraska Recycling Council in opposition of LB 599. The NRC is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to maximize the economic and environmental benefits of resource recovery in the state. The recycling industry is part of my daily conversations and professional life, and while I am curious about advanced recycling, the most pressing issue we have is access to traditional recycling. I'm choosing not to focus on the feasibility of advanced recycling, but the issue of these facilities competing for grant funds when communities in our state don't have access to recycling at all. I understand that household hazardous waste, or HHW, facilities in the state are not specifically mentioned in the Integrated Solid Waste Management Act like what is proposed for advanced recycling, but they can still be funded. To that point, there are household hazardous waste facilities in the state right now that don't have adequate funding to dispose of hazardous materials with potential to end up in drinking water. Adding any new type of facility should be under the same rules and regulations as the current ones. The American Chemistry Council is openly involved with pushing this type of legislation and has worked with ExxonMobil regarding chemical recycling. I don't feel that it's right that small nonprofits in Nebraska would potentially be competing with that magnitude of corporations. What I feel is most important for the Nebraska Recycling Council to share is data from our most recent statewide municipal survey. Only 214 out of the 312 communities that responded have access to traditional recycling, and the issue of funding or cost was mentioned at least 50 separate times by the clerks. 1/3 of the communities in the state don't have access to recycling, and NRC believes the first priority should be to stabilize recycling in the state, and all before the grant funds are shifted to new technologies. Lastly, I think this conversation raises the question of who is benefiting from this proposed change. Organizations such as Keep Nebraska Beautiful or the Nebraska Recycling Council have statewide reach, and we assist businesses, organizations, residents, regional entities every single day. How do advanced recycling facilities provide public benefit to a state that has not yet even been able to establish traditional recycling? Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next opponent, please, on LB 599. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Bosselman, members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Al Davis, ALDAVIS. I am a registered lobbyist representing the 3,000 members of the Nebraska chapter of the Sierra Club, and we are here today to oppose the advancement of LB 599 for a number of reasons. While recycling is a commendable endeavor and worthy of support by all Americans who care about the environment, there are a number of things about the bill which cause our members concern. It is worth noting that the bill is formatted differently than many bills. Senators should compare new language with the stricken language to be sure that all portions of the stricken language are reproduced in the bill. And if you dig into the bill, you'll see that there are about 4 or 5 pages of stricken language, but it's also sort of repeated, which is not the way I'm used to reading bills. I'm just pointing that out. There are clauses in the bill which exempt the industry from regulation by any political subdivision, and some important language is not defined. For example, the word council is used many times in the bill with no definition. City council, business council, church council, I don't know what it is. On page 2, lines 21 through 23, the bill specifically describes what this industry is not. And that definition could easily be used to prohibit regulation of the industry under any of the laws applying to those industries. This is repeated in lines 29 through 31 on the same page, that's page 2. And as you move through the bill, you will see that the industry has exempted itself from state and local regulation under the Integrated Solid Waste Management Act. It also appears to exempt the raw materials from regulation as solid waste, which is an erosion of current state and local laws today. The bill also states that the product is not produced through incineration, but the use of steam and other high-temperature materials to reform these plastics should be subject to clean air laws. And the bill appears to exempt the industry from that regulation as well. This is a new industry. It would be a mistake to exempt a new industry from regulations which should be in place to protect the land, water, people, and livelihoods of Nebraska's residents. Poor regulation produced a disaster at Meade, Nebraska, and that wasn't pretty. Please do not advance the bill, and thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have any questions from committee members? Chair Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Boswell. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for being here. I noticed the same thing you did. It kind of bugged me about. It was hard to read.
Very hard.
So you went through and listed a bunch of stuff they're exempted from, and we're talking about they should be regulated as manufacturing, not as recycling. And I'm
That's
having
what they
trouble-
claim.
Right. But for the sake of argument, say that they're supposed to be regulated as manufacturing, not recycling. Where in this bill does it establish that they are regulated as such?
As solid waste?
No, as manufacturing. If
I
they-
don't think it does.
I read a whole lot of sections where it says exempted from. I don't
Right.
see any
I don't
section
see
where
any,
it says
anywhere in the
subject
bill
to.
where it says that.
Okay, so I'm just not, it's not just me that's missing it.
No, I don't think so.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions?
Thank
For your testimony. Anyone else like to testify in opposition to LB 599? Any other opposition? Seeing none, anyone like to testify in a neutral capacity on LB 599? Please step forward.
Good morning.
Morning.
Chairman Bosselman and members of the Natural Resources Committee, my name is Blair MacDonald, spelled Blair Macdonald, and I appear before you today as the registered lobbyist for the Nebraska Beverage Association to testify in a neutral capacity on LB 599. The Nebraska Beverage Association has been representing the non-alcoholic beverage industry and local distributors of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Keurig Dr. Pepper Snapple in this state for over 40 years. My comments today also represent the neutral position of the Nebraska Grocery Industry Association. The Nebraska Beverage Association, as well as the Grocery Industry Association, have a long history of supporting recycling in the state. When our members read LB 599, they were immediately concerned for the recycling organizations that we have long supported. Our organizations felt the need to weigh in today as industry supporters of recycling because we want to ensure that our local recycling programs are not negatively impacted by this legislation. As you've heard, local organizations like Keep Nebraska Beautiful and the Nebraska Recycling Council receive grants from the Department of Environment and Energy to fund community recycling programs, projects, and recycling education across the state. One of the existing state cash funds, which we've discussed earlier, is the Waste Reduction and Incentive Fund. This bill would allow chemical recycling facilities to also qualify and apply for grants from the Waste Reduction and Incentive Fund. This would put chemical recycling projects in direct competition for state funding with our local recycling nonprofits that are already creating great recycling initiatives and projects across the state. Our associations believe the Waste Reduction and Incentive Fund should continue to prioritize grant funding for our local recycling nonprofits as it was originally intended when it was put in place in 1990. The other issue we see with this bill is that advanced chemical recycling would not be subject to any local, municipal, or county oversight. The bill would exempt municipalities and counties from adopting or enforcing ordinances and regulations regarding chemical recycling under the Integrated Solid Waste Management Act. Not only would chemical recycling be able to apply for state funds, but they would then be exempt from local oversight of how the funds are used in communities across the state. Our traditional recycling facilities and projects are subject to municipal oversight as are local nonprofit recycling projects. We believe chemical recycling should also be subject to the same regulations and ordinances as other forms of recycling and waste management, which is what we are talking about today. It may be an unintended consequence, but the Nebraska Beverage Association and the Nebraska Grocers wanted to ensure that local community recycling programs remain unharmed by this bill. That is why we're appearing in the neutral position on LB 599. And we'd ask that the committee take into consideration our concerns when considering this bill. Veering from my prepared testimony, if this is about state funding to help support an emerging industry of manufacturing of chemical recycling, we do think that there would already be funds that they could apply for potentially under the Nebraska Imagine Act as a manufacturer. And what we're talking about here is the solid waste reduction, the waste reduction incentive fund, which is already funded by fees, as Mr. Chaffin was previously speaking about, fees that are regarding waste management. If they're deeming that they are not solid waste management industries, why would they be applying for state funds that are going towards reduction of waste management? I'll leave it there. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else like to testify in the neutral capacity on LB 599? Any other neutral testifiers? Seeing none, Senator Armendariz, you are welcome to close on LB 599.
Hi, thanks. I want to thank everybody for testifying today. Learned new things, and I always welcome any new information that I can learn from anyone. I want to reiterate that we worked closely with the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy on this, and they raised any concerns, and we addressed all of them appropriately. Now, I know there were some questions that weren't quite answered by senators here, and I know our testifier as a proponent is probably really, really deep in her industry, and we all are not. So I tried to pull out some lay information from what she was saying in the conversations I've had with her before. So if I can try to explain the difference between their company and a solid waste facility would, and I'm guessing here, a waste management that takes all of our garbage to a landfill might have regulations around that landfill that they need to turn over that waste every so many days or bury it or remove it. Or maybe they have water runoff that needs to be tended to or drained or processed in a particular way. This is not that at all. It's an enclosed facility with raw materials that then they process. It doesn't have open air piles of garbage laying around that would need to be processed the same way a solid waste facility would need to be regulated. So I hope that clarifies a little bit more of the questions of what they're trying to avoid. They're just trying to classify themselves appropriately, not avoid anything. Does that help at all? And I don't know if I can ask that question, but.
Thank you, Senator Armendariz. Are there any other questions?
It sounds like one of their biggest issues is applying for grant.
Oh, sorry, Senator Hughes.
What did you say?
Sorry, just nothing. We just supposed, I need to identify you for the record before you speak. That's okay.
Sorry, Christy. So it sounds like some of the biggest opposition was specifically for that waste reduction recycling fund, right? That's taking money, you sell your tires, money goes to it. It's for waste, reduction. And then is that a deal breaker in this legislation, or is that something that
I don't think it is.
I don't know.
I don't think it is.
Or do
but-
we talk to the NDEE and say, I think you need to favor clearly state, local, and I don't know. What were your thoughts?
I hesitate the protective mentality because I think this is in addition to, these are plastics that aren't going to be recycled. They're going to a landfill.
Yep.
And without a better alternative for those, I would hate to try to protect the little bucket over here that isn't going to address those. We no longer can ship these to China. We have to find somewhere to put them. Are we going to ship them to Staten Island? Or are we going to find a place in Nebraska that's now going to take on these exponential amounts of plastic that we were shipping to China? And there were a lot. And I do know First Start Fiber, and I believe and I could be wrong, that they do a lot of paper recycling and cardboard. I know in my personal experience, that's what they do. They might not be addressing still these hard plastics that nobody is addressing, that are, for lack of better ability to recycle them, they're going to the landfill. I think it's a great opportunity to create manufacturing, highly technical jobs in this manufacturing process, and bringing more people to the state to fund our economy and our tax base.
Sir Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But it seems to me that as I look at this, the issue really isn't, if they're removing waste that otherwise would have gone to a landfill, I don't have a problem with them accessing the fund. I think the bigger issue here is regulation, and what is appropriate regulation for this particular industry. Seems to me that that's what the bill is trying to get to. And I guess I would have some concerns about eliminating the broad overreach of any kind of municipality or county oversight as just a blanket. And that's where my concerns would be, is it looks like the work needs to get done in how this industry would be regulated, should be regulated. And there seems to be some pretty broad exemptions in here that would, I think, is giving people indigestion. And I think that's probably where the concern is. I don't think we should be running from competition. I don't think we should be denying them access to the fund if they're truly removing solid waste from the landfills. They should have access to the fund. To me, it comes down to the regulation. What's the right regulation? And I have to agree with Mr. Davis that, somebody came up with the bright idea to allow discarded seed corn to go to Mead, and look at the mess we have there. So we just want to make sure there aren't any unintended consequences. So I think that's where the indigestion is, and probably where we need to continue to do some work.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Senator.
Sir Mosier.
Well, after listening to this discussion, I can see where there could be conflicts, because there might be regulations about taking all types of recycling at some facilities. Some recyclables are commercially viable, aluminum, steel, cardboard, sometimes clean white paper. But bottles, glass, there's very little market for. Some of the plastics, there's no market for currently. So I could see that, there might be regulations to require a recycler to take plastics, even though they're not profitable, and try to cover that cost by selling paper, aluminum, steel, and those things. So I could see, that could be a conflict as we move forward. And that may be one reason that these chemical companies don't want to be trying to recycle cardboard and stuff when that's not their business. They want to do the plastics. Mm-hmm. The other part of it that I didn't think of right away until the gentleman from the League of Municipalities talked about it a little bit more specifically, though. The recycling fund gives grants to cities and nonprofits for operation of the recycle center, just operational costs. Cardboard balers, aluminum can bins, trailers to go out and park out into the community to collect recyclables. When I was mayor of Columbus, we got conveyors to convey materials into the recycle building. And I could see where a manufacturer could have way more use for those funds, and they could draw that fund down pretty quickly, because the money kind of trickles into that fund, $1 here, $1 there. And then, and so many people depend on it. And if somebody swamped the fund, and even if they are doing a good thing, it may put all these little recycle centers put them out of business. Most of them have volunteers that run it. They don't get a salary. We lost money on our recycling center in Columbus. We finally got out of it and just let the commercial people recycle the things that are commercially viable. And because it was $50,000 a year we were losing in our recycling, and we had one or two people employed there, and then a bunch of volunteers. So, thank you.
Seeing no other questions from the committee, there were no position letters received. I will note for the record that Senator Armendariz did provide AM 213 and 214, and she did explain both in the opening. With that, we'll close the hearing LB 599. Thank you all for coming today.
This one was tough. We spent it all. We're on focus at this point. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's the favorite. Why is it so hard so fast? It's hard to change your hand. I don't have the vocabulary, chemical processes that she does. Well, but just answer the question. Yeah, relax. Yeah, he did. Yeah. She, that's something she did. And we have to.
Oh, this is.
Yeah, you're.
Yeah, okay. Let's get it going. Thank you.
In case you were wondering.
565.
Okay, now we'll open the hearing for Bill 565. Senator Bosselman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Mosher. Good morning, members of the Natural Resource Committee. My name is Bruce Bostelman, BRUCE-BOSTELMAN, and I represent Legislative District 23. I'm here today to introduce LB 565. Nebraska has a tremendous opportunity to lead in the growing hydrogen economy, benefiting Nebraskans as creating new products and markets for our ag industry, providing high-quality jobs, including in rural communities, solidifying access to the fertilizers necessary for Nebraska and our region, and providing more food security for the people we feed around the globe during a time of international energy and fertilizer shortages. The Federal Regional Clean Hydrogen Hubs Program, or H2 Hubs, was part of a larger $8 billion Regional Clean Hydrogen Hubs program funded through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA. The program proposes to establish 6 to 10 regional clean hydrogen hubs across America. These clean hydrogen hubs will create networks of hydrogen producers, consumers, and local connective infrastructure to accelerate the use of hydrogen as a clean energy resource. During the 2022 Nebraska legislative session, LB 1099, a bill to create the Nebraska Hydrogen Hub Industry Working Group, was passed and signed into law. A work group was appointed by Governor Ricketts. The industries represented by the working group included Monolith Materials, Werner Trucking, Union Pacific, Nebraska Farm Bureau, Tallgrass Energy, and Nebraska Public Power District. They have taken the lead on this effort. They've worked with a leading engineering firm on sophisticated linear programming modeling to put forth a competitive proposal. There is potential for more than $1 billion of matching dollars from the federal program for the projects identified in our regional hub application. This would serve to accelerate the development of production, transportation, and ultimately consumption of hydrogen-related products in Nebraska and other partner states. Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri have jointly formed the proposed Mid-Continent Clean Energy Hydrogen Hub, MCH2, and recently submitted a proposal to the Department of Energy in response to the release of the DOE's Regional Clean Hydrogen Hubs Funding Opportunity Announcement. Of the 79 proposals submitted to DOE, only 33, one of which was Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri proposal, were encouraged to move to the next phase. Nebraska Public Power District has taken the lead role in pulling together industry partners to put forth this competitive proposal. While working closely with the Nebraska Department of Economic Development and other state agencies, it's helpful that the subject matter experts have taken the lead. The H2 hubs will be a central driver in helping communities across the country benefit from clean energy investments, good paying jobs, and improved energy security. This opportunity gives Nebraska and our agricultural producers and industries an opportunity to further diversify their product offerings and revenue streams. With hydrogen-enhanced biofuels, including sustainable aviation fuel from ethanol, renewable diesel for trucks, tractors, and trains. It helps create better, more secure access to the fertilizer necessary to continue being a leader in global ag production. And it creates an opportunity for our transportation industries and electric generating utilities to further diversify their fuel sources. The next steps, including submitting a full application to DOE, will require significant additional engineering and modeling, showing the DOE the production capabilities necessary, connective infrastructure to move the hydrogen and hydrogen-related products, and the potential consumption in the state. The engineering and modeling will be needed as the projects progress through the FOIA timeline, which are approximately 2 to 3 years for the first set of projects to get off the ground. LB 565 allocates $250,000 in FY 23-24 and $250,000 in FY 24-25 from the general fund to the Department of Economic Development for the purpose of providing grants to any public power district that serves a majority of counties in the state. The grants are to be used for engineering and modeling work to prepare and support the state in competing for one of the United States Department of Energy's regional clean hydrogen hub designations and associated federal funding. There will be more testifiers behind me that will be able to answer more technical questions, but I'll try to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Vice Chair Moser. I'm excited about this. Thank you for bringing this bill, Senator Bosselman. So the National Hydrogen Hub designation, if we're fortunate and we get that or part of that, what is that worth?
Potentially, well, those behind me probably can answer that, but it's $1 billion project.
And that would be just our region would be
For
$1
our
billion
region.
project. Okay, I will wait for the other testimony.
They can correct me if I'm wrong.
Will do. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Hughes.
So what public power districts would qualify for this? I know you said MPPD is kind of taking the head, but are they coming together for this, all of them, or how's that?
Primarily be MPPD. OPPD probably could be considered, but MPPD covers most of the state.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, Senator. Anybody else to speak in support of this bill?
Good morning, Vice Chair Mosier and members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Courtney Dentlinger, COURTNEY I'm Vice President of Customer Service and External Affairs at Nebraska Public Power District. And we are the largest electric generator in the state of Nebraska. I did want to pause just a moment and address a question that Senator Hughes had asked. We have been taking the lead at MPPD on this effort, as Chairman Bosselman indicated. However, we are working very closely with the other large power generators in the state, including OPPD and LES. Okay. So I wanted to start by thanking Chairman Bosselman for bringing the bill and for his support for this effort. We are also very excited about this opportunity. As he noted in his opening, this is a tremendous opportunity for Nebraska and for our region when it comes to hydrogen. NPP has been working on the Hydrogen Hub opportunity for more than a year. We've pulled together a diverse group of industry leaders, as noted by Senator Bostelman, including Farm Bureau, Union Pacific, Warner Trucking, Tallgrass Energy, and of course our longstanding collaborators, Monolith Materials, who is an innovative clean hydrogen producer in the state. And there are many others we're working with across Nebraska and, as Senator Bostelman indicated, into Iowa and Missouri on this effort. Including those in the energy industry, manufacturing, agriculture, and transportation. It's a rather complex topic, a lot of nuance and many connections to our state's existing industries, but I'll do my best to give a very high-level overview, complementing what Senator Bostelman shared with you, and I would be delighted to answer any questions that you may have. So you might wonder, why is an electric utility interested in hydrogen? There's many reasons. First and foremost, beyond our mission to reliably serve Nebraskans, NPPD is committed to the economic development of our great state. We serve all or part of 84 of Nebraska's 93 counties, whether at wholesale or retail. Our in-house economic development team works hand in hand with local and state economic development partners to grow and diversify our state's economy. NPPD decided to take the lead on this opportunity because after conversations with our partners at DED, we understand how incredibly busy they are rolling out funding opportunities that were made available through ARPA dollars. And in addition, we do have the subject matter experts on staff. I would be happy to refer any detailed chemistry-related questions to those subject matter experts. We're a leader in renewable and biofuels production in Nebraska, and those industries are a huge market for the corn and soybeans we grow. Our Hydrogen Hub proposal identifies opportunities to further diversify those product offerings from those industries, including sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel. These additional clean fuels for trucking, heavy machinery, ag equipment, locomotives, and airplanes will provide continued and expanded markets for those industries and for our agricultural economy. Many of the potential projects that we're looking at related to this opportunity would actually be located in rural areas of the state, bringing tremendous capital investment and high-paying jobs to the entire state, which would help stem rural outmigration. In addition, it offers the opportunity for production of clean ammonia right here in Nebraska, reducing the reliance on imports of this critical agricultural input. Access to domestically produced fertilizers increasingly important, as exemplified by the fertilizer shortages caused by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This has benefits not only for Nebraska and our region, but for the entire United States and for global food security. In addition, NPPD believes having diversity of fuel for our generation portfolio is important. It allows Nebraskans to have increased reliability, but also affordability and resiliency. We're ahead of the curve on studying the potential use of hydrogen for electric generation, given our work with monolith materials. We're also exploring opportunities with hydrogen-related fuels, such as methanol. In addition, nuclear power plants, such as Cooper Nuclear Station, here in Nebraska, can be utilized to produce hydrogen through electrolysis, which could complement the reliable, clean electricity we produce to power Nebraskans. As Senator Bostman noted, this bill would provide state funding to offset some of the costs that NPPD has incurred for sophisticated economic modeling to prove the production capabilities in Nebraska, the necessary connective infrastructure needed to move the hydrogen and associated products, and the projected consumption in our region, all required for a successful hub application. As you noted, this is a fiercely competitive opportunity. However, we have made it past that first hurdle. And the wonderful thing is, sorry, I'll wrap up here. Any of the modeling that we're doing, even if we don't receive the significant funding available from the federal government and the Hydrogen Hub designation, is going to benefit the furtherance of the hydrogen economy in the state of Nebraska and the region. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Hughes, number 2.
I am not number 2.
Oh, you be number 1 now.
I am number 1 now. Or we can say like the female version. Okay, now I'm distracted. Okay, sorry. Where are we? You said we're narrowed down to the top 3?
No, there'll be 6 to 10 Hydrogen Hub designations from the federal government.
Okay.
There were 79 concept papers submitted last fall, and 33 of those were given the green light to move forward to the full application, which will be due in April.
33 are competing for about 7
Yes.
slots. We got 1 in 4.5 chance.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Vice Chair Barber. Thank you for being here and for sharing your expertise and insights. I'm excited about this as a possibility as well for our state, especially for the rural areas and high-paying jobs. I think that's important that we have opportunity across the state. So that's very encouraging. Can you educate us a little bit about the timeline? You mentioned the second phase is due in April.
Mhm.
When might we expect to kind of have more of a sense of where this is going to go for the state?
Yeah, the targets are kind of ever moving with the federal government. I saw a joke earlier about what it means when you hear specific terms. Soon for the federal government may mean 2 months. So, but we hope sometime yet this year we'll be given an indication on whether or not we receive that hub designation. Now, initially they are looking at 6 to 10. We do believe there'll be a second phase, and this is going to position us very well. Putting the modeling together for this is going to position us well going forward into the future for the hub efforts. What they're looking to do at the federal level, this truly is a regional effort, and they want to identify regional hubs. We think we're very well positioned, being in the center of the country, and with the transportation infrastructure that we have with I-80 and I-29 and others. In addition, some of that connective infrastructure that's really important. There is an ammonia pipeline that runs through Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri with a significant amount of ammonia moving every single day. And that infrastructure is going to be critically important as well. We also have the consumption, ready-made consumption in the state, and other hubs will struggle with that. They'll have to ramp up consumption, whether it's in transportation or with industry. Here, because Monolith and others will be able to produce ammonia, we have the ammonia market here with our agricultural economy. And so it will help us scale up much quicker than others.
And do you believe we have the workforce for something like this?
Well, actually, Senator Bosselman's got another bill in that would help to build workforce in the hydrogen space and also in the advanced nuclear space. I think it's an incredible opportunity. I have a background in economic development, care very much about the state and also the rural areas of the state. These jobs will largely be located in rural areas, and they're going to be very good paying jobs. So I think we've got a great opportunity to hopefully help reverse some of the outmigration that we've seen.
That's great. Thank you.
Senator Brand.
Thank you, Vice Chair Moser. Thank you for your testimony. Regardless of whether or not we win the designation, we still want this bill to go forward because we can still do hydrogen and discover uses for it in the state of Nebraska. And that's really the purpose of this bill is it's exploratory in nature. It allows NPPD to make industry aware of the opportunities here in the state of Nebraska. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely, yes.
Because Monolith is in my district and it's a wonderful addition to the district. It was originally built to supply hydrogen to the Shelton plant right next door to burn in the plant in lieu of coal. Why did that not happen?
So Monolith actually, one of the reasons they came to Nebraska, besides really liking public power and the stability that we offer and the low rates, there was an opportunity for us to offtake the hydrogen, but their facility was actually put in place to produce carbon black, clean carbon black. So we actually had an agreement in place that would allow us to study that opportunity. And we did do detailed modeling and engineering to determine what would it take to actually burn hydrogen at Sheldon Station. And we included off-ramps in that agreement if the costs ended up being too high, because we'd asked Monolith to help cover the cost for the conversion. And what happened was, indeed, as we did that modeling, the costs were significantly higher than what we had originally agreed to. And Monolith found another opportunity, which is also incredible for the state, to actually produce hydrogen utilizing, or excuse me, produce ammonia utilizing that hydrogen. We are still looking though at potentially utilizing hydrogen at Sheldon Station and as well as other fuels. One of the great things about hydrogen is you can convert it to ammonia, you can convert it to things like methanol, and it's easier to store. So it's a great way to store energy. And I think as we saw a couple years ago during a winter weather event, having that on-site fuel is incredibly important from a resiliency and reliability perspective. And it's again why we are very much in favor of having a diverse generation.
All right.
mix.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Other questions from the committee? So Monolith is still producing carbon black,
Yes.
and the hydrogen was kind of a byproduct to their separating the carbon black from the chemicals they were using.
Yeah.
And so not burning the hydrogen wasn't the end of the world for them because they were able to make fertilizer with it, which is worth a princely sum. And so you're not upset by that.
Oh, no, absolutely not. We have a great working relationship with Monolith, and our service territory covers a lot of agricultural producing land in Nebraska.
Well, I know, I didn't ask the question correctly. It wasn't that you'd be upset, but there was a good purpose that evolved from the relationship with Monolith.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of what Senator Brandt was saying. Why didn't it continue? Well, they found a better purpose, a more economical purpose
Yes.
to that.
Absolutely. And we wrote the contract specifically in that way because they've got to make a business decision. So no hard feelings whatsoever. We work very closely with Monolith, and Amy Ostermeyer will be coming up to testify, I believe, immediately following me, and can answer additional questions. But I'm happy to talk about the relationship that MPPD and Monolith have.
Senator Brandt, you still have a question?
Yeah, real quick for the record. So you are the largest supplier of electricity in the state of Nebraska.
Correct.
When OC2 is built, who will be the largest user of electricity in the state of Nebraska?
Monolith Materials.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anybody else here to speak in support? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Vice Chair Moser, members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Amy Ostermeyer. That is spelled AMYOSTERMEYER. I am the Executive Vice President of Development at Monolith. I am also proudly serve on the gubernatorial appointed Hydrogen Hub Working Group that was created by the legislature last year. Happy to be here today. Obviously, many of the questions you asked of Courtney are really appropriate for Monolith. I do want to thank you for taking the time to consider this important legislation. LB 565 is a necessary step in Nebraska's hydrogen hub journey and helping to boost our chances of driving significant investment into Nebraska. I will not reiterate everything the previous testifiers discussed. Instead, I do want to introduce those new committee members to Monolith and provide an update for those members who already know a bit about us. Monolith is a producer of clean hydrogen and carbon black. Our proprietary process uses carbon-free electricity to convert natural gas into these two co-products without producing any carbon dioxide in the process. Our flagship location is known as Olive Creek 1, is located in Hallam, Nebraska. It was completed in 2020 and is successfully running and selling carbon black to customers today. Company headquarters, along with our world-class research and development center, are located in Lincoln, Nebraska. Today, Monolith employs more than 150 Nebraska workers in highly paid, highly skilled, clean energy jobs, and plans to grow that number in 2023 by an additional 10%. Olive Creek 1 is about a $120 million investment, capital investment in the state of Nebraska. Due to the growing demand for both clean hydrogen and carbon black, just after completing construction of the first facility in 2020, we began our expansion plans in Nebraska as well. That expansion project is called Olive Creek 2. Construction of Olive Creek 2 is anticipated to begin most likely at the end of 23, early part of 2024. It's about a 3-year construction cycle, and so we expect to begin production out of that facility in 2027. The Olive Creek 2 expansion project will increase clean hydrogen production to nearly 60,000 tons annually. And as we discussed in Nebraska, we will convert that clean hydrogen into carbon-free anhydrous ammonia, enabling the production of 275,000 tons of clean ammonia annually from Hallam, Nebraska. The facility will be over $1.5 billion capital investment in the state and will create another 200 jobs here. Monolith's goal is to sell that ammonia locally to farmers in the region, helping to secure local supply chain for this essential resource for Nebraska farmers. Currently, most anhydrous ammonia is imported into Nebraska, and now that we've provided this method to produce it here, we're incredibly excited about securing that supply chain for this essential product. Given the existence of Monolith's current commercial scale hydrogen producing plant and our plans to already expand in Nebraska and become the world's leading clean hydrogen producer, a Nebraska-based regional hub has a distinct advantage that would capture this existing production source of clean hydrogen situated in the central United States, creating a unique ability to connect all of the hubs that will be created from coast to coast throughout the heartland. The next phase of our energy transition in the United States and in the globe is clean hydrogen. The production of clean hydrogen allows us to decarbonize these much harder to decarbonize sectors such as ammonia production while creating hundreds of high-paying jobs, advanced manufacturing jobs right here in America. Our proprietary clean hydrogen technology is critical to the success of the Midwest hydrogen hub application, and we do anticipate that a portion of the hub funding will be requested to directly support the expansion of Olive Creek 2. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that committee members have today.
Questions for the testifier? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Mosher. Thank you, Ms. Ostermeyer. Sorry. It's obviously exciting. I just got to pile on with everybody else about how exciting this is. So you just, at the very end there, you said you would expect that the hub money would be, if we get that federal money, would be to go to.
A portion of the dollars could go to the production facility. That's right.
And so the timeline matches up to the development of the production facility.
It does. As the previous testifier commented, our full application is due April 7th. We expect there's a little bit of ambiguity in terms of exact timelines coming from the federal government, and some of those have shifted since the bill was passed. But we expect interviews to begin and decisions to be made in the back half of 2023. As I mentioned earlier, we're working towards beginning construction at the earliest, the back half of 23, early 2024. And if that timeline comes together, that works well. Of course, additional funding like this, we would time the beginning of construction based on those decisions as well.
Okay, but you're still going to build it even if we don't get the money?
We are.
Okay.
We are.
And then in terms of, you said you guys are basically unique in your process. Does that put us in a strong, I guess this is asking for your opinion of it, whatever. Is in your opinion, or do we have a unique application in this because of the placement of Monolith here?
We do. I think that the existing facility coupled with our already existing plans that are already designed, and we're just finishing the final engineering design work with Kiewit on construction of the facility, puts us well ahead of other hub applications across the country. It's a very competitive process. We're, one of 33 applications today. And, as you look across the country, many of those are still very much in the concept phases. And so the fact that we're ready to begin construction within a year of actually getting funding is a significant advantage to this hub.
Great, thank you.
Senator Jacobson.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mosher, yes, Ms. Ostermeyer, I guess I'm a little curious about, you made the shift from really what you were going to deliver to MPPD when in the anhydrous ammonia production, which is great. I think from a farmer perspective, I really appreciate that. But we also recognize that anhydrous ammonia has really rocketed higher over the last 2 years. Amazing how we get shortages when the price of corn goes up. But where do you see this happening, assuming we get this project and you've expanded your capacity? How elastic is that price of anhydrous? In other words, if we start getting anhydrous ammonia back to historic levels, is that still going to work for you from a profitability standpoint? Will you be shifting out of anhydrous into something else and just hydrogen? Or how reliable will that anhydrous production be?
It's a great question. So when we made the decision after consulting and partnering with MPPD to transition from selling hydrogen to them to producing anhydrous ammonia, prices were very different for ammonia at that point. We always take a conservative approach. Our business model is one that we need to be economically viable without any sort of federal incentives or state incentives. And so we are very comfortable with where the price of ammonia lands in our business model, that will continue to be able to be profitable moving forward based on where we've used the price per ton in our economic models. It's very, very competitive with prices around the 2019-2020 timeframe.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think last I looked on anhydrous ammonia, about $1,300 a ton retail. wholesale. I'm hoping that one day we get back to maybe half that number. I'm not sure. That might be wishful thinking.
Yeah.
So if you were looking at, say, getting half the wholesale price, are you still competitive? And
We are
you'll
still
make that work?
competitive and viable with that price as well.
Great, thank you.
Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Senator Moser. And I've decided I'll be known as the younger Hughes.
Well, the other one was such a force that being compared to him is a pleasant comparison.
Anyway, all right, sorry. Gotta have a little brevity, right?
Levity. Well, brevity too. Brevity might be more important.
Brevity might be better.
We don't
Yeah,
have
might be better
brevity
than
on this
levity.
We need both. See, now it's just going way too long. This is a curiosity question. You guys make clean or carbon neutral hydrogen and then carbon black. I'm just curious. Carbon black goes into, does it make tires? Is that what?
The primary use of carbon black is it goes into a tire. So a third of every tire on the planet is made up of carbon black today.
Okay.
Today, carbon black is produced by burning a bottom of the barrel form of oil to make it. So a tremendous amount of CO2 is emitted from that process. So today Monolith makes that carbon black without emitting any CO2 and can be a direct replacement for that carbon black. But anything black, plastic, or painted black contains carbon black. So we're literally surrounded by carbon black, not only in tires, but the drink that you have there on your table has carbon black in it.
Okay.
The ink in my pen, batteries, it's literally everywhere.
Thank you.
So you get points for being ecological and producing carbon black without bad byproducts.
We do. Our goal is to be the low-cost, high-value provider of both products. So we will sell those products in a competitive way. We think that's important in energy transition to be cost competitive. And our process allows us to do that because we have two products that we produce.
Maybe that'll get you some bonus points in the selection process too.
That's right. The overall project, we do think, advantages the hydrogen hub for Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri significantly because of those features.
Other comments? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anybody else to speak in support?
Morning.
Good morning and welcome.
Members of the Natural Resources Committee, my name is Andrew Dunkley, Andrew Dunkley, and I am with the Nebraska Farm Bureau. I am excited for this exciting project. To quote our earlier conversation, LB 565, as has been mentioned, the Nebraska Farm Bureau serves on the hub committee that was formed after last year's 1099 was passed. We thank everybody who testified on this, and I'm not going to belabor their points, especially as I do not have the scientific background. However, agricultural producers I believe in, and I apologize to NPPD if I am misquoting this, but while Monolith, if this project goes through, would be the largest single user of electricity, obviously pivots and farmers are the largest overall users. So we want to make sure that we have a affordable, reliable, and diversified energy source for our agricultural production. So with that, I will shut up and answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else to speak in support? Anybody to speak in opposition? Anybody in opposition? Anybody in a neutral capacity? We lucked out. Senator Bossman waives his closing. That'll end the hearing for LD 565.
And levity.
Oh, we had some letters of support.
Just